Romeo Beard. Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hoffman. For this, my topic is on the Harlem Renaissance, Jazz Age, how it became a cultural renaissance. Okay, so the Jazz Age was a part of the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance, and it was mainly took place in Harlem, New York. And jazz truly served as a gateway to the success for many different musicians during the 1910s, 1920s, and the 1930s. Harlem, as this presentation shows, was the place where many black performers established or developed their careers. In order to speak on what the Jazz Age was, we must first define jazz and tell how it initially became popular among African Americans. So jazz had very strong elements of instrumental. It was very strongly instrumental. It was included instrumental improvisation, and one of these forms was known as syncopation, as previously mentioned. And this was used mainly by Scott Joplin, and where instead of music being on the same tone, where, as for example, a song may go have a beat that's like this. He innovated a new style where the notes would change, so it would sound more like this. So it was very innovative at that time. And connected to jazz were two elements of jazz known as ragtime and blues. Ragtime was a style of music, as previously mentioned, that came from minstrel shows of white people in blackface, but over time, it evolved as black people made it its own genre of music. And in 1897, Thomas Turpin became credited as the first African American to compose a rag known as Harlem Rag. Other famous ragtime musicians were Scott Joplin, Jelly Roll Morton, and Thomas Fats Walker. And I have a clip here. This is a composition by Scott Joplin known as The Entertainer from 1902, and it was done for the movie The Sting, which was very successful, winning 7 Academy Awards. He had many songs from that movie, but this is one of his most famous ones. jazz, we now go to blues, which was a secular form of music, and where people would sing largely based on their emotions during the time. And although it was a secular style of music, wouldn't be hard pressed to hear it in more religious places like churches. So the birthplace of jazz is in the South, namely New Orleans. During the early 20th century, jazz moved to north to cities like Chicago and New York. This occurred during the Great Migration, when Southern blacks moved to the north. These migrants hoped to escape the harsh persecution below the Mason-Dixon line and to gain opportunities for success in the north. Some did so in music, especially jazz. A major event occurred in Harlem in 1921. It was the opening of the first all-black musical on Broadway that features jazz music and dancing. Noble Sissle wrote the lyrics for the songs in this musical. U.B. Blake composed the music, and Florence Miller and Aubrey Lowes served as writers. White music critic Carl Van Vechten was very impressed with the musical, saying, "Shuffle Along was instrumental in initiating the Harlem Renaissance and influenced musical taste in the city of Harlem and beyond." One of the hot spots during the Harlem Renaissance was known as the Cotton Club. It was a place for nightly entertainment in Harlem during the 1920s and the 1930s. The owner of the Cotton Club was a white gangster known as Oni Madden. Oni Madden opened the Cotton Club as a place for his alcohol distribution during the Prohibition era. It was located on 142nd Street and Lenox Avenue in Harlem, New York. White Americans from the city and the surrounding suburbs packed the seats in this nightclub. However, the performers were black. These persons put on a good show. The club was so popular that Columbia Broadcasting System, as we know it, CBS, started to do nationwide broadcasting from the club. Two great musicians who performed and developed their careers at the Cotton Club were Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong. That these talented performers were broadcast on radio made them national celebrities, and black jazz became a part of the national culture. Duke Ellington was a regular performer at the Cotton Club, performing there 6 nights a week, and became so popular that he did many radio broadcasts, 200 broadcasts to be specific, on WHN, a New York City radio station. Some of his most famous songs were ones with racial messages like Black Beauty and Creole Love Call. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1969, which is one of the highest honors in America. Louis Armstrong, born in New Orleans, learned to play the trumpet after he was arrested at the age of 13, housed at the Colored Waifs Home in New Orleans. He moved to the north in the 1920s and played the trumpet in jazz bands in Chicago and New York City. He substituted for white hosts to become the first black American to host and sponsor national broadcasts. His biggest hit was Hello Dolly, which was very popular with youth in the early 1960s, winning 2 Grammy Awards in 1965 for Song of the Year and Best Male Vocal Performance. After Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong had become cultural figures in entertainment, another generation of black Americans appeared. Some, like Billie Holiday, performed in Harlem and then became national sensations that influenced American music. Billie Holiday had a very tough childhood. Her parents weren't around much as her parents were very young, leaving her to grow up on her own. She was raped only at the age of 10 years old. She began singing at the age of 15 to earn money during the Great Depression. Some of her songs had to do with the tough times going in the world at that time. Namely, her song Strange Fruit was on lynchings in the South, and her song God Bless the Child was based on her own personal alienation. As already indicated, some black musicians became part of the national culture through radio broadcasts. In this way, so-called Negro music became American music. The Mills Brothers are a major example of black performers who crossed over from black musicians to American musicians. with the regular radio broadcast that eventually got them spots in movies and time on TV. The Blues Brothers were originally known as the Four Kings of Harmony and were a jazz quartet founded by their parents John Hutchison and Ethel Mills. Louis Armstrong, like the Mills Brothers, appeared in movies. His career in movies dates back to the 1930s. Shown in the poster, Dorothy Dandridge, who appeared with many white musicians in Sun Valley Serenade in 1941. By the 1940s, black entertainers appeared regularly in movies made in Hollywood. American culture was changing. In conclusion, Harlem's place in history is more than just that part of New York City where jazz was performed for a while. It was the place where black musicians created a style of music that influenced the development of American music and entertainment. As Alain Locke observed long ago, these black musicians helped to create a new and better image for black Americans in the United States. This new Negro helped to make new Americans that ended the Jim Crow era when new Negro jazz had begun in places in Chicago and Harlem. Thank you.